What if I told you that one man's encounter on a storm-ravaged mountain changed everything we know about faith, morality, and the divine? Picture this, a towering peak wrapped in supernatural darkness where lightning doesn't just flash, it dances with otherworldly power. Thunder doesn't merely rumble, it roars with the voice of eternity itself. The very ground quakes beneath your feet as if the earth itself is holding its breath. And there, at the epicenter of this cosmic tempest, stands one solitary figure, Moses, trembling not from cold, but from the overwhelming presence of the Almighty. This wasn't just a chat between man and God. This was the moment that would rewrite human history, forge the moral compass of civilization, and ignite a spiritual fire that still burns in hearts across the globe thousands of years later. What Moses witnessed on that mountaintop was so extraordinary, so earth-shattering, that when he finally descended, his very face blazed with divine light, terrifying everyone who dared to look upon him. But what did Moses actually see on Sinai? What caused his face to radiate with light, and what made his life take on new meaning? In this video, we will examine this extraordinary story, discovering its spiritual message and lessons that we can apply in our daily lives. Moses was not a random man. His life from the very beginning was marked by God's plan. Saved as an infant from the waters of the Nile, raised at Pharaoh's court, and later a shepherd in the desert, Moses traveled a long road before he stood on Mount Sinai. His story shows that God often chooses those who feel unworthy or incapable of great things. Moses himself said, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" And yet it was precisely he who was chosen. This is an important lesson for all of us. Often we feel unworthy, weak, or too imperfect to meet the challenges that life sets before us. But the story of Moses reminds us that God does not look at our limitations. He sees in us potential that we ourselves often do not perceive. If you feel that you are not good enough, remember that God chooses those who are ready to trust him, not those who are perfect. Imagine that Moses, standing at the summit of Sinai, not only saw God's glory, but also experienced something that changed his heart, an understanding that God desires to be close to each of us. This was not merely a moment of revelation, but a profound encounter that forever transformed his life. Moses understood that God is not a distant creator who observes us from afar, but a father who desires to be present in every moment of our lives. This experience reminds us that God constantly invites us into relationship with him, a relationship that is not based on fear, but on love and trust. In a world full of noise, haste, and distractions, are we able to stop in order to hear his voice? Can we find the time to enter into silence in which God speaks to our heart? Perhaps our Sinai is the moment when we decide to set aside our plans, ambitions, and worries to allow God to work in our lives. This is an invitation to silence, which is not emptiness, but space filled with his presence. In this silence, we can discover that God not only gives us commandments, but also desires that we know his love, his care, and his plan for our lives. What does your Sinai look like? Is it a moment of trial in which you must trust that God is with you, even when everything seems difficult? Or perhaps it is a time when God invites you to stop and listen to his voice? Each of us has our own Sinai, our own spiritual mountain, to which God invites us to ascend. The question is, are you ready to respond to this invitation? Are you ready to climb your mountain and meet God face to face? Mount Sinai is not merely a geographical place. In the Bible, mountains often symbolize an encounter with God, a place where man rises above to experience something greater. The journey to the summit of Sinai that Moses took is an image of the spiritual journey that each of us must undertake to draw us closer to God. It might be a difficult decision we must make, a challenge we must overcome, or a time of solitude when we search for meaning in life. The road to the summit is not easy. Moses had to leave the people behind, enter the cloud, and trust that God would lead him further. In the same way, we too must sometimes leave behind what is familiar and comfortable to enter the unknown, into a space where we can meet God. Imagine that Moses, standing at the summit of Sinai, not only heard God's voice, but also experienced his presence in a way that transcends human understanding. This was not merely a moment of revelation, it was an encounter that required complete surrender and humility. Have you ever wondered why God chose precisely a mountain, a place so remote and difficult to reach? Perhaps because a true encounter with God requires effort, requires climbing, not only physical but above all spiritual. Sinai reminds us that God does not reveal himself in haste or in the chaos of everyday life. He invites us to rise above what is earthly, to leave behind our fears, excuses, and comfort. This is a challenge but also a promise that at the summit awaits something that can change our lives forever. Are you ready to undertake this climb? When Moses ascended the mountain, Holy Scripture says that Mount Sinai was completely in smoke because the Lord descended upon it in fire. Clouds and fire are symbols of God's presence, which appear repeatedly in the Bible. The cloud symbolizes mystery, that God cannot be fully understood or seen. Fire, on the other hand, symbolizes his holiness, power, and purification. This reminds us that an encounter with God is not always easy or comfortable. Sometimes it requires us to enter the cloud, into a space where not everything is clear and understandable. This might be a time of trial, when we do not see the path before us clearly, but must trust that God is with us. As the psalm says, "Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path." Even in darkness, God leads us with his light. On Sinai, Moses received from God the tablet, or in other words, a stone, with the 10 Commandments. They were not merely a set of rules, but the foundation of morality upon which spiritual and social life is based. These commandments remain relevant today, reminding us of what is truly important. The first commandment, "You shall have no other gods before me," reminds us that God should always come first in our lives. In today's world, it is easy to allow other things, work, money, relationships, to become our gods. But true happiness and peace can only be found when our lives are rooted in God. The 10 Commandments are also a reminder that our relationships with other people are as important as our relationship with God. Commandments such as, "You shall not kill," "You shall not steal," or "You shall not bear false witness," teach us how to live in harmony with others. This is a lesson that is particularly important in today's world, where it is so easy to forget about respect and love for one's fellow man. One of the most remarkable moments in the story of Moses on Mount Sinai is what happened after his descent from the mountain. Scripture says that the skin of his face shone due to his speaking with the Lord. This light was a visible sign of God's presence in his life. This event has profound spiritual significance. When we spend time in God's presence, our lives begin to radiate his light. Perhaps not in the literal sense, as with Moses, but in a way that is visible to others. People may notice in us peace, joy, and love that come from God. As Jesus says, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden." This is a challenge for all of us. Does our life radiate God's light? Do people who meet us see in us a reflection of his love and goodness? If not, perhaps it is a sign that we need to spend more time in his presence, in prayer, in reading Holy Scripture, in silence and reflection. The story of Moses on Sinai carries with it many lessons that we can apply in our lives. Think about it. Moses had to trust God, even when the road was difficult and full of unknowns. He ascended the mountain shrouded in clouds, not knowing what awaited him. It is similar with us. Sometimes we do not see the path before us clearly, but we must believe that God is leading us in the right direction. This requires courage and trust. but it is precisely in such moments that we can experience His presence. Moses spent 40 days and nights on Sinai, conversing with God. This shows how important it is that we too find time for meeting with Him. In the daily rush, it is easy to forget about prayer, about a moment of silence in which we can hear His voice. And yet it is precisely in such moments that God speaks to our hearts, gives us strength and shows us the way. The 10 Commandments that Moses received are not merely a set of rules, but signposts that lead us to a fuller and more fulfilled life. Life in accordance with God's commandments is life in harmony, a life with God, with other people and with oneself. This is a reminder that our relationships with others are as important as our relationship with God. And finally, think about how Moses' face radiated light after meeting with God. This was not merely an external change, it was a reflection of the inner transformation that took place in his heart. It is the same with us. When we spend time in God's presence, our lives begin to radiate His light. People around us may notice something different in us. Things like peace, joy, love that come from Him. Do we witness this phenomenon? Do we allow God's light to shine through us? These are questions that each of us should ask ourselves. Each of us has our own Mount Sinai, moments when God invites us into a deeper relationship with Him. We must trust that God is with us, even when everything seems difficult. When our lives are difficult, it might be a time of trial, it might be a time of solitude, or it might be God inviting us to spend more time with Him. Or it might be a moment when God gives us a new task, just as He gave Moses. Remember that God does not invite us to Sinai to frighten us or burden us. He invites us to transform us, to give us new life and new understanding of His love. Just like the letter to the Hebrews says, "You have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, to the heavenly Jerusalem." Sinai is only the beginning, an invitation to an even deeper relationship with God. The story of Moses on Sinai is a reminder that God desires to meet with each of us. He invites us to ascend our mountain, to leave behind what limits us, and trust that His presence will transform our lives. Are you ready to respond to this invitation? If you enjoyed this video, I would appreciate if you would like the video and subscribe to the channel so we can spread the good teachings of the channel together. Thank you for listening.